All right. So, hello everybody. As Greg said, I'm Peter Porskamp. Currently a postdoc in his lab here at Dalhousie. But today I'm going to be talking about data that I analyzed during my PhD at Deakin University in Australia, where my supervisor was Daniel Ierodiaconou, and like Schimel said in his talk just before, he produced some of the water column mosaics that we used here. All right, so just a little brief introduction. Some of you may or may not know, due to increases in sea surface temperature changes, there's been a global decline in macroalgae populations. This is particularly relevant in the study area that we're going to look at due to the East Australian current, bringing warmer and warmer water, which is expanding local urchin populations, which are destroying a lot of the macroalgae ecosystems in place. My thesis was really focused on habitat maps and using novel approaches on trying to improve their accuracies. And so I thought, is there a way we could use multibeam echosounder data and incorporate that into the habitat mapping workflow? So yeah, it's been talked about a lot today. The first thing that went into my mind was water column data, because I knew there were studies on gas heat detection and military applications, as well as biomass assessments on macroalgae. So I figured, why not try to incorporate some of this data into the habitat mapping workflow to see if it helps improve classification of macroalgae classes. When I did a little background, I found there was quite limited studies on how to include this in the habitat mapping workflow. So the goal of this chapter of my thesis was essentially to evaluate benefits of including water column in habitat classification. So just a little info on the study site. It was Bunurong Marine National Park. It's 21 kilometers squared. It was established in 2002. It's located east of Melbourne. It's characterized by shallow rocky reefs, communities from 2 to 24 meters, and extensive rotolith beds over 7 and greater depths. We conducted the multibeam survey, collecting full coverage bathymetry, backscatter, and wall column data. In addition to that, we did quite a robust ground truthing survey. We took the bathymetry and backscatter and performed an unsupervised ISO classification to try to determine how many classes of habitat we thought were there. After that, we took those classes and then spatially sampled them for 80 transects instead of having a few long transects. It's kind of a long story, but essentially my other thesis chapters before this, I ran into a lot of problems with spatial autocorrelation of ground truthing data set because most of the towed video lines were maybe up to 2 kilometers long. So there's, I had to end up removing a fair amount of data in order to limit the spatial autocorrelation, and this was an attempt to remove that. So for the classification scheme that I use, it's called the Combined Biotope Classification Scheme, known as CBICS. It's a hierarchical classification scheme. It's adopted by Victoria, the state of Victoria, Australia. That's why I used it. It's hierarchical in nature, and this is why I put this image up, is because we did 3 models essentially of the different hierarchy levels, which is broad habitat classes, which is BC2, the habitat complexes, which is BC3, and 5 tope complexes, which is BC4. And here are just some stills collected from our ground truthing surveys, with most emphasis on high energy subcanopy brown seaweed communities, which are dominated mainly by Tonia radiata philosopher. So the first step to see if this would work was obviously to get the water column mosaic into a mosaic form. So this is where Schimel came in. What was done on the data, there was a slant range normalization here from Schimel's giant kelp paper, I do believe. On the left-hand side, you can see a water column snippet that hasn't been filtered, and on the right, it has. For our set. This is an example. On the left is a snippet without any algae or macroalgae beds, and on the right is with macroalgae present. The picture below is the process data after radiometric corrections and masking of the outer beams, seabed echo, and samples below the bottom. So that black dots on the second row of photos just represent the seafloor. And then below that is the polygon of what we wanted to look at and extract. So our focus was on the 1 meter, essentially above the seafloor. We filtered out the echo below and any of the outer beams as well. And as you can note in the figure on the left, it's actually much deeper water, so we lose a lot of data in the outer beams. And that's my next point, which was the mosaic generation. So on the left-hand side image here is the raw mosaic that was generated by Alex. So what I needed to do in order to incorporate it as a continuous raster in my predictive models was essentially try to fill the gaps. And so I did that through object-based image segmentation. So what I did is I ran a segmentation algorithm on the bathymetry and backscatter layers. I took that segmented surface as polygons and then aggregated the multibeam water column data set over that in order to get the continuous surface that you see on the right. Here's a zoomed in image. In the bottom right, you can see the left-hand side represents the backscatter, the raw data on the top, the object-based image analysis on the bottom, and then the right-hand side is the water column and after. And the ground truthing there on the sides just represent the green represents high energy, so canopy brown seaweeds, and the blue infrared fine sand. This is just a diagram to try to help visualize all the steps we went through to produce the model, the final habitat models. So the bathymetry and backscatter were used to make the object-based segmented surface. In addition to those, we took derivatives from the bathymetry and backscatter, like porosity, slope, and complexity. And there was also the water column data set mosaic that Schimel provided. Each of those went into the random forest classifier that we used the toad video survey as ground truth, and we did some cross validation to assess model accuracy. Another thing to note is that we assessed all of our variables included in the model using variable importance, which is the primary reason we use random forest, because it provides a metric of variable importance called mean decrease in accuracy. So essentially, the higher the value of mean decrease in accuracy, the more, if it was removed from the model, it would affect the overall accuracy. So we use this to discard unimportant variables. And if there were a correlation between two variables that exceeded our parameters, we would choose the variable that had a higher mean decrease in accuracy to remain in the model. Fortunately for us, the water column data, although it was a little positively correlated with backscatter, fell well below our metrics of 0.7 for the Pearson correlation coefficient. And so you can see here for the three different models, we have the variable importance and water column appear to be the most important for the biotope complex. Okay. So here are the results. So this is the first model, which is the habitat complex. In the top table, you can see the overall accuracy of the model with water column included, and then without water column included. That's how we decided it would probably be best to assess how well water column made a difference. As you can see, there was no difference, which was kind of to be expected, because as you can see, the three classes here are quite broad and not really defined biotically, such as sublittoral sediment and infralittoral and superlittoral. So now we're into the habitat complex level, which is BC3. So here we start to see a little bit of change in the overall accuracy of the model when we include water column data versus when it's left out. There's a difference of 0.49 0.49% points. And that's mainly due to the differences in class accuracies of the high energy open coast littoral rock and sublittoral mixed sediments. If you recall earlier to the photo, the photos from the ground truthing survey, this can be due to multiple things. In the high energy open coast littoral rock class, there's quite a few sponges which may have been detected in the water column, that 1 meter water column layer above the sea floor. And finally, the biotope complex results, which we see the biggest and significant difference in overall accuracy of 4.18% points. And that's mainly due to two classes. The high energy subcanopy brown seaweeds had an improvement in overall accuracy when the water column data was included in the model. In addition to that, the sandy low profile reef wave surge communities were also included. And I forgot to mention a little earlier in the talk, but the reason why we focused on that 1 meter above the seafloor is because the species there they don't grow much over 2 meters if they even reach that. And in addition, Bunurong Marine National Park is also in a very, very high wave energy area. Like we're talking over 60% of the time, we're 2 to 2.5 to 3.5 meter swells in the survey area that we were in. So when we did the tow video surveys, most of the time the algae was like laying on its side from the swell going back and forth. So conclusions, including water column data, improves habitat classification accuracy when you're predicting classes with macroalgae. And it could be a tool for monitoring change in macroalgae distribution over time. Future directions from this project were to apply methods to site with a larger canopy forming algae. Unfortunately, we didn't have a data set available to do that. But that was something I was keen on doing. And something to end off on was, unfortunately, Dan Ierodiaconou couldn't attend the talk today just because of the time zone differences. Is he in right now?
Yes. So Mike.
Okay. I don't know if Dan wants to. This is kind of like his slide anyway, but.
Here's that.
Hi all, sorry I can't be there in person. I managed to get in and see a couple of talks this morning. It's great to see the group all together. Yeah, look, I was just thinking about backscatter and the needs for some sentinel sites where we could potentially collect certain data sets with input from the backscatter working group in terms of what we need, in terms of backscatter acquisition, but also in terms of the observation data that we would like to test a whole lot of habitat characterization workflows, whether it be for sediment or biotope. So I thought I'd just put up my hand to say that we'd be very keen to set up a sentinel site in Australia. Currently, we're running a Consberg 2040C, but we're currently looking at purchasing a 2040P with multi-frequency capability. So thank you.
So that's the end of my presentation. Anybody have any questions?
Peter, glad you were able to join Dan. We've got a couple more minutes if we have a question or two. I know I've seen a few of the Southern Hemisphere colleagues coming online. That's one of the reasons we were running late today. So